You're watching RT International. Welcome back. The U.S. State Department has faced a grilling over the deaths of numerous civilians in Syria, allegedly killed by recent American-led coalition airstrikes. The airstrikes, conducted by U.S. and French warplanes, have been strongly condemned by human rights groups. The Syrian government put the death toll of two separate attacks at 140 civilians, which was described by Amnesty International as unprecedented collateral damage from coalition forces in Syria. Chichikan has been sounding out the State Department in Washington for us.
U.S. officials say they're investigating reports about civilian casualties in a U.S. airstrike in the Syrian city of Manbij. When asked whether the U.S. thinks the strike was a mistake, the State Department spokesperson became visibly annoyed.
The U.S. strike that reportedly killed around 20 civilians in the ISIL-held city of Manbij in Syria, was it a mistake on Monday?
That's another great accusatory question you've asked here. No other military works as hard as ours. None. No other military in the world to prevent civilian casualties. And when they happen, again, I'll say it again because apparently it didn't sink in the first time. When it happens, we investigate it fully and completely. And then we're transparent about it. And then we take the lessons learned and we try to prevent it from happening again.
The U.S. is accused of killing around 20 civilians in the strike in Manbij, and State Department's John Kirby accuses me of asking an accusatory question. His irritation did not stop there. I also asked him whether the U.S. military was willing to tolerate civilian casualties for high-value ISIL targets. In January, when the U.S. bombed a building in Mosul with huge amounts of ISIL's cash, U.S. officials told CNN that the commanders had been willing to consider up to 50 civilian casualties from the airstrike due to the importance of the target.
One official telling CNN the U.S. was willing to risk up to 50 civilian casualties in this area to get the building, to destroy the building.
State Department's John Kirby brushed off the CNN report and said the policy is one civilian casualty is too many.
Just to be clear, one is one too many. And we take each and every single instance seriously. So it's not about the number. And don't for a minute think that we take any particular number more seriously than any other.
Previously, when another State Department spokesperson was asked about U.S. policy toward civilian casualties, he admitted that the value of the target is part of the calculus.
As a calculus, so a particularly important target, you'd be prepared to tolerate a greater number of civilian casualties.
Again, I'm not going to give you a formula for that. I think,
no,
you know, I mean, obviously.
You used the word calculus. I'm just trying to.
No, I understand it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be facetious at all. I'm just trying to say that these are very difficult processes and very difficult decisions to make. And obviously, we're dealing with high-value targets. But I just would say that that's always part of our calculus when we're looking at that.
Manbij is the city that connects Raqqa, ISIL's pseudo-capital in Syria, with the outside world. As Defense Secretary Ash Carter explained on Wednesday, it is important for the coalition to take it away from ISIL. When the value of the target matters, is the U.S. approach really, like John Kirby said, one civilian casualty is too many, and should we understand it literally?
The policy is not zero tolerance for civilian casualties, is it, at this point?
I've already explained to you our policy and our approach to civilian casualties. I don't think I need to explain it any further.
Just the day after the Manbij strike? Just the day after the Manbij strike?
In Brazil today.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
I had more questions on whether the U.S. was helping investigate the reported French airstrikes in the village of Duhan al-Kubra, which is on the Syrian-Turkish border. The strikes reportedly killed 120 civilians on Tuesday, the day after the Manbij strike. Since France is part of the U.S.-led anti-ISIL coalition, one wonders if members of the coalition coordinate their strikes and what the U.S. knew about the reported French strikes. I did not get to ask those questions because State Department's John Kirby blocked all my further questions on the issue of civilian casualties in coalition strikes.
Chichikan reporting, well, the incidents led to a reaction from the Western-backed groups in the conflict. Syrian opposition forces are calling for a suspension now of the U.S.-led air campaign against Islamic State in Syria. Well, among the opposition groups condemning what they call the shocking massacre is the Free Syrian Army. Dozens of other opposition factions also say they will not allow crimes to be justified under the pretext of combating terrorism. We heard from experts who told us it's time the Western coalition reconsidered its strategy.
I have two observations to make with respect to this incident or continuous series of incidents. First, the risk of this operation, without coordinating with the parties that are most knowledgeable about the ground, about the presence of the civilians, that is the Syrian government and the Syrian army that is fighting on the ground, makes of these crimes a willful misconduct. Two, this alone would cast doubt about the claim of the leader of the coalition that we take all measures during the targeting process to avoid or minimize civilian casualty or collateral damage. The veracity of such statement is just absent. There ought to be some kind of reaction by the world community and the U.S. European allies, so on.
We need better coordination. Despite the disagreements and hostilities, we need better coordination between the U.S.-led coalition, the Syrian government, and the Russians. If they shared intelligence more, if they coordinated attacks, then that might be one factor that could reduce civilian casualties. And, you know, ultimately, of course, the real end game, the real prize, is to get all sides in the conflict to sit down and agree a peaceful resolution. Conflict on any side, for any reason, anywhere in Syria, is against the civilian population and not conducive to ending the conflict. We need a negotiated political settlement. We need all parties at the table.
Man's best friend isn't popular among everyone in the English city of Manchester, it seems. Dog owners have been given leaflets telling them to keep their pets off the streets for religious reasons. The handouts were published by a movement called For Public Purity. It claims the area has a large community of Muslims who would be upset by seeing the pets, which are considered impure in Islam. Many, however, think it was a provocation by Islamophobes. The chief executive of the Ramadan Foundation says the people behind the leaflet are simply seeking to stir up trouble and create greater division in British society.
Well, it clearly looks like a scam. It's an attempt to divide communities, and particularly after the Brexit vote, there are people on the far right who are trying to stir violence against minority communities, whether it's the Polish community, whether the Lithuanian community, Romanians, Bulgarians, or for that matter, Muslims. And I think there is no evidence whatsoever that this organisation exists, and that the leaflets are genuinely coming from the Muslim community, and I totally reject that. These are, necessarily the people on the far right of our politics and our life who are jumping at the chance to attack Muslims and, demonise us and our faith. And I've not seen, as I said, no evidence that this, pseudo-organisation exists. And if it did exist, why has it just appeared now?
Well, there's been lots of reaction to this, particularly in the area. Many pointed out that Britons famously love their animals. With calls emerging for a mass dog response through Manchester, some even provocatively insisting on making sure the route passes through predominantly Muslim areas.